All right, folks, I thought I'd talk a little bit about Pasteur here and his contributions to the world of microbiology. Um, Really, what he helped contribute is to somewhat squash the idea of um, spontaneous generation, right? And so you can go back and look in your chapter and see the idea of spontaneous generation and some of the other folks that dealt with it. And so the idea that things just living things just spring eternal. And so this came about because you have maybe you have some meat or you have some broth that's in a container, and you didn't see any organisms in it, and you left it out overnight or for a few days, and then all of a sudden you see things growing on it. And so the idea that there was nothing there before, and how did it get there? Well, it must have spontaneously generated. And so there was a number of folks and experiments that kind of pointed to the idea that maybe there was no spontaneous generation. And sorry, I went for a run this evening, so I'm a little tired. Um, but the one that kind of finally put it to rest was Pasteur. And so what Pasteur did is he took these Swan-Necked flasks and he put broth in them and he heated them up for a pretty good amount of time, right? And so when he would heat them up, some of the steam would leave. But obviously, when he left them sitting, anything that was out in the atmosphere, only air could come back in. So if there was any dust or particles, it would tend to collect in the neck here and wouldn't go all the way back into the actual broth. And so when he left them like that for long periods of time, he got no growth in the broth. It stayed clear. And then what he would do was either break the neck of the flask or tip the flask over so that some of the broth would interact with the crook and then let it run back in. And when he would do that, he would then see that he would get growth in the bottom of these swan neck flasks. So what that told him was there wasn't spontaneous generation, right? Because if there was, you would have got growth here when you left this flask by itself. It was only after things, small microbes or dust or whatever, fell down into the broth that you actually got um, the living things to emerge so that you could see them, right? And so that was one of the final kind of nails in the coffin to spontaneous generation, and led to the idea that life comes from pre-existing life, right? Looks a very simple experiment here, but of course back in the day, that was quite breaking stuff. But look over some of these names and kind of see what they did and what were some issues of some of their experiments, um, and compare that to what Pasteur did. And note, 1895. That sounds like an extremely long time ago, but go to some church graveyards and things, and you can find some headstones that aren't much terribly older or about that age, or not terribly younger than that. So yeah, it kind of fascinates me how far we've come now, right? But that's Pasteur.